If you haven't seen Sorry to Bother You by director Boots Riley, then I highly recommend you watch it before you continue this video. Not just because it's a great movie and I don't want to spoil it for you, but because it'll help make this video make a whole lot more sense with all the unique plot twists and turns that are better understood through context in the film. This video also gets political, and unless you've seen the movie, you might think what I talk about in this video is based on opinion, not a direct interpretation of the film. Sorry to Bother You is a statement on America as much as it is a comedy or a sci-fi fiction. So I want you to be able to see why I came to the conclusions that I did instead of thinking I made all of this up. If you don't like politics, maybe this video isn't for you. Got it? Awesome. Now onto the video. Sorry to Bother You is a film about modern society and how the underlying factors that determine the script of our daily life are created, as shown by the signs shown throughout the film. STTS. Stick to the script. Today in this video, we will explore the 4 factors most present throughout the film: consumerism, capitalism, chauvinism, and corruption, and how they shape our life. The whole plot of Sorry to Bother You is based around how capitalism works and leads to problems. But in order to understand how capitalism affects us, we first need to understand the concept of consumerism. According to Investopedia, consumerism is the idea that increasing the consumption of goods and services purchased in the market is always a desirable goal, and that a person's well-being and happiness depend fundamentally on obtaining consumer goods and material possessions, which I think is a perfect definition. When we meet Cassius, he isn't even living paycheck to paycheck. He's coasting off his uncle's money by using his car and living in his garage. He's lost in the world of consumerism as he thinks there is no point in life, wondering if the sun is going to explode and everything ever accomplished will just walk away. In contrast, Detroit, Cassius' girlfriend, serves as a foil to Cassius and has found purpose in her art and her social justice, as we can see with her first pair of earrings stating "kill, kill, kill, murder, murder, murder," a reference to the Eat the Rich movement, but we'll get to that later. It's also worth mentioning that Cassius goes by the nickname Cash.
But are you going to pick me up on Friday? That's what I want.
Is Cash green?
Yeah, Cash is green.
Making his name Cash Green, a bit of the on-the-nose nod to consumerism. After Cassius gets a job at the telemarketing business, we see him put up a picture of a man, likely his uncle or another mentor or parental figure, with a car which at first begins to represent his goal to get rich, but takes on a new meaning as the film goes on. The tale of consumerism gets worse as we see more of the type of calls that Cassius does, even going as far to get an elderly lady to buy a product based on the fact that her husband has cancer and they are in debt. He truly is sticking to the script that is shown to him, even though it is immoral. Later they see a celebrity from a show they don't care about but are still impressed because the celebrity is famous, which shows their culture of celebrity worship, which prompts Cassius to follow the celebrity into the VIP section, where he had a bad time in a pretty lame environment, but because it was exclusive, he said he enjoyed it.
That's some baller shit.
The University of Chicago says, "We put greater value on things that other people want but can't have, just because they can't have them," which is shown in this scene as a key element of consumerism. This is also seen when Langston, the older telemarketer, asks for the good stuff, when in reality the liquor is the same, or when Cassius goes up to the top level after he gets promoted and has to type in an unnecessarily long passcode. Speaking of Cassius' promotion and the elevator that represents him working, quite literally, above his peers, the next day when Cassius sees the unnecessarily gold-plated elevator, Boots Riley uses a dolly zoom shot to show how significant the elevator, or being important, which it represents, is to him. When Cassius gets a promotion, he sees the football team behind the manager because he believes he finds his purpose just like the football players did. Except for Cassius, it is getting a promotion and succeeding financially, not having friends.
I mean, like, look at our high school football team. Literally, look at them. All they do is work at the home furniture store and play football all day. It's just like they're stuck or something.
What the hell are you talking about? I mean, they're friends.
We then see Cassius reading a book by Hal Jameson, who is worshipped so much that they put photos of him having sex on the wall, despite the fact we later find out he is a fake person made up by egocentric billionaire Steve Lift to give workers false hope that their hard work will result in more money. Finally, after a few weeks or months of success in telemarketing, Cassius is invited to a party where he sees Steve Lift for the first time. We are introduced to Steve Lift a bit before through posters and signs, but the first time we get to see him clearly, he is doing cocaine, showing his extremely hedonistic nature. The hedonism is hammered in even more when we see Mr. and others at the party brown-nosing Steve Lift for clout and to help reach their goals. As the party goes on, we see more hedonism and bragging about killing a rhino and the orgies going on in his house. When Cassius meets up with Steve Lift for a private conversation, he is shown a film directed by a director named Michel Gondry, a reference to Michel Gondry, who is most well known for making a film called Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is about a couple learning that chasing pure hedonism and ignoring the bad memories isn't best for the long term, a clear parallel to the message shown in Sorry to Bother You. There are plenty of more examples of the characters chasing pleasure and material goods while avoiding pain to their own detriment, but I think by now you've gotten the concept of how consumerism affects the characters and shapes the movie. Oh boy, where do we start with this one? Arguably the most important of the 4 themes mentioned in this video, the whole message of Sorry to Bother You relies on an anti-capitalist mindset. This goes all the way back to the beginning of the movie, where Cassius is rewarded with a job at a boring telemarketing place, might I add, for blatantly lying, and when he reaches out to shake his manager's hand to be social, he's given papers to help him do his job, instead of being treated like a human being. Not much later, we get to see what it is like in Worry Free, which looks exactly like a prison for the people in it. In fact, Cassius' uncle literally calls it 3 hots and a cot, which is slang for prison. And even later on, both Mr. and Steve Lift refer to Worry Free as slavery, which shows how Boots Riley views what capitalism leads people to. A life similar to prison where you work all day just to go home, recharge, and do it again. This could also be a take on the United States prison system as well. Color is very important in this film, as he was influenced by the aforementioned Michel Gondry, famous for his use of bold color, and you can see that mostly in Cassius' corruption to becoming a corporate villain, but also when he enters the office in the beginning to the monotonous gray cubicles that the telemarketers work in, representing the dull and lifeless days in capitalism. Even the sodas that they drink are generic and not even free for the workers. They also promote people to power caller, not manager, which is just more bait to get them to work harder, or as Squeeze puts it,
but I have heard about that power caller shit that you're talking about. That's a scam.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. If you work hard enough as a fry cook, maybe you can become a manager. Or if you twirl that sign really well, then maybe you can twirl a larger sign on a more glamorous corner.
Of course, being promoted to power caller is quite significant in this film for the sake of the plot, but the point still stands nonetheless. Then we see Cassius put up a black and white photo of what looks to be a father figure in his life with a nice car, which represents his financial goals of being able to afford things like fancy cars that the person is next to. This photo changes over time, and when Cassius later obtains his financial dreams, including a fancy car, we see the photo in color for the first time, representing how he had done what he set out to complete. However, this time the person in the photo isn't smiling. He seems to be disappointed in Cassius, which is why we can draw the conclusion, based on Sigmund Freud's theory of human psyche, that the color of the photo represents the id or the instinctual desires. Cassius represents the ego or the conscious part of Cassius, and the person in the photo's expression represents Cassius' superego or his morals. Eventually, the person in the photo gets more disappointed as Cassius continues down the rabbit hole of chasing money, but as Cassius later redeems himself by successfully starting a protest against Worry Free/Regal View, the person in the photo is overjoyed and proud of Cassius. Back to Cassius getting hired in the telemarketing gig, when the manager, Diana DeBoucherie, is speaking as a representative of Regalview, a company who chases profits above all else, states how their employees will not get paid despite being called family, but instead will get the bonus of social currency, which she argues is more valuable, and says not to believe her just because, but to believe her because all the mainstream media is pushing it on society. This is the most clear example of hypocrisy throughout the movie, and shows how corporations will try to manipulate people into working for less so that those up top can have the most profits. We then see Cassius' uncle taking pills from an absurdly large cross pill container, representing how the proletariat are forced to pay for the sins of others, in this case the corporations. In another reference to Riley's opinion on the criminal justice system, we see Detroit wearing electric chair earrings before Cassius gets promoted to power caller. Once Cassius gets up to the power caller floor, we see how the Mr. a man with an eye patch, is proudly bragging about how they sell weapons of mass destruction to countries with no shame. This is linked to Mr. eye patch, as an eye patch is a metaphor for him being able to see what he is doing with one eye that works, yet partially blind as he cannot see how he is committing horrors to selling slave labor that affects everyone badly, including him. Cassius is manipulated by the money and his greed to work for the power callers, showing how people lose their morals when it comes to money. Meanwhile, Detroit has done the opposite by joining the radical anti-fascist Left Eye movement, which shows how they have started to grow apart even more, emphasized by him not picking her up later on. When Cassius later does meet up with Detroit at her art gallery, Detroit is quite literally talking about the theme of the movie, capitalism taking advantage of the poorest people to benefit the most privileged, and he can't even focus on that because he's too worried about getting the reward right in front of him, in this case, a joint. Cassius is so blind to what he is doing, when someone he loves is directly spelling it out to him, he still makes the same mistakes. The next day, Detroit says if he crosses the picket line, she will break up with him. Despite this, he crosses anyway, and the violence from the police helping them cross the picket line represents the violence that is caused by unfair compensation, which usually goes unseen to the general public. He also gets a soda thrown at him, leaving a mark on his head bleeding, which represents the emotional turmoil he is beginning to go through. The can, on the other hand, is important as well, but not until later. After work, Cassius comes to Detroit's art gallery where she, this time, is using a white voice, which is something we'll explain a little bit more later. This is a nod to what Cassius said earlier about selling art to rich people and how that doesn't actually inspire any change. She then gets on to stage to do a performance where things that represent evil get thrown at her, and Cassius can't believe it. Detroit is reciting a reference to Angela's speech in The Last Dragon, which is about her realizing she doesn't need to coast off the evil money provided by her partner, Eddie, who is not a good person. This is a direct comparison to Detroit and Cassius, where Detroit no longer needs to coast off of Cassius's money that he gained from being a power caller. Cassius, fully manipulated at this point, can't believe it, as he can't understand why anyone would subject themselves to the pain that comes from standing up to evil when there's no monetary gain. The whole time, Detroit was wearing earrings saying, "You're gonna have to fight your own damn war," an anti-draft protest song by Prince, which gives us a peek into the mindset that both Detroit and Boots Riley share. Afterwards, at Steve Lift's party, we see Steve tell Cassius that only Cassius can see the big picture, of which he means advancing society's technology, medicine, and efficiency, even if people are quite literally treated no longer like human beings. Cassius sees people watching the video of him getting hit by a soda and finally realizes that he was the victim the whole time. He also realizes what the soda means, how companies use capitalism to take something that means something significant and turn it into a marketing strategy, similar to what is being done with the LGBTQ+ and BLM movements. They are meant to be inspiring others to change, in this case, to not cross the picket line and sell slave labor, but the companies have changed it into something that they can sell and market, causing the act of the soda throwing to lose all of its original meaning. Like the older employee Langston said earlier,
I personally Love seeing a motherfucker get beat down and humiliated. makes me feel warm inside. I got the motherfucking t-shirt.
When Cassius gets to Steve's room, he is asked if his head is alright, which it isn't, showing his mental status. We know Steve doesn't really care, though, because when Cassius asks to go to the bathroom, he's denied until he has to beg for permission. Oddly enough, Sorry to Bother You predicted the scandal that another corporate giant in Amazon had to deal with when they were accused of not letting employees take bathroom breaks to maximize their productivity. See, Steve wants his employees to be workhorses, literally, and that's why there are a lot of horses scattered around the film when being around Steve. Even pictures of Steve riding on top of some horses, representing how he rides on top of the workers to take advantage of them. Cassius finds out about this whole horse operation when he goes to the bathroom and chooses the wrong door. In Steve's mind, it was obvious what door to go into because he can tell the difference between Jade and Olive easily, when in reality, they're both just green. This just goes to show how Steve looks down on people less privileged than him and thinks that they aren't as competent as others. But despite this misunderstanding, Steve still invites him back to watch a film to explain what the whole horse people thing was about. Like mentioned before, he shows a film to explain the horse operation to Cassius. And in the film, the freaky-looking monkeys and humans in the film are designed to be creepy because they are subhuman to Steve, where he even promotes violence against one another as a necessary tool and goes on to say the horse people are bigger, they're stronger, and hopefully they gripe a lot less, without even mentioning the pain that the humans must go through. And if this wasn't bad enough, we learn that Steve Lift and his crew likely had this planned out for a long time, as he says he wants
someone who will fucking shank their own friend in the back if it means getting what they want.
Seeming to imply that they were following his career the whole time and were proud of him for being disloyal to the strike workers. After Cassius leaves Steve's party, he decides to get checked out by a doctor to see if he is part horse now. And while in the lobby, we see more celebrity worship with people reading all about him, and later in the film, we see people going as far to receive to Steve as Jesus. We then see Detroit with a new set of earrings stating, "Tell Homeland Security we are the bomb," which are lyrics to The Magic Clap from Boots Riley band The Coup, which talks all about protesting against the rich, capitalism keeping them in wage prison, and people taking action after being mistreated, which aligns with the next few scenes. In fact, Detroit is looking at a protest art piece that she likely made about Worry-Free, which is both literally and figuratively represents the way Worry-Free is treating their employees. It is also a sneaky nice moment, as we now have proof that Detroit was truly making art as a form of protest and not to fulfill any financial obligations. Cassius also gets his redemption by going out on the show I Got the Shit Kicked Out of Me and exposes the video of Steve Lift turning people into equisapiens. He does essentially what Detroit did earlier in her art protest and took the pain and humiliation that comes with getting a message across, showing he now understands what it's like, the purpose of Detroit's earlier art gallery show. However, even with this video being shown, it only increases Worry-Free and Steve's profits, because in capitalism, people will stand by and let horrors happen if it doesn't affect or benefit them. Or as Squeeze puts it,
If you get shown a problem but have no idea how to control it, then you just decide to get used to the problem.
okay. Collins' dictionary defines chauvinism as a strong, unreasonable belief that your own country, sex, race, or religion is better and more important than any other. But for this movie, it is mainly about white people looking down on minorities, especially African Americans. Chauvinism is most often seen throughout this movie in the form of the white voice, or as Langston describes it.
Now, I'm not talking about Will Smith's wife. That ain't wife, that's just proper. I'm talking about the real deal.
Okay, so like,
Hello, Mr. Everett. Cassius Green here. Sorry to bother you.
I mean, you got it wrong. I'm not talking about sounding all nasal. It's like sounding like you don't have a care. Got your bills paid. You happy about your future. You about ready to jump in your Ferrari out there after you get off this call. Put some real breath in there. Breezy, like, I don't really need this money. You've never been fired. Only laid off. It's not really a white voice. It's what they wish they sounded like. So it's like what they think they're supposed to sound like.
This might not seem that bad to you, but it is demeaning to have to act as someone who you aren't just to get treated like you can be successful. It is also more corporate and toneless, which shows the personality being drained out of Cassius as he uses it. Of course, however, the more corporate and toneless he gets, the more successful he is at his job, as well though, a statement on minorities losing their individuality to succeed in America. By the time Cassius reaches the power color level, he must use the white voice at all times just to have a job. It eventually gets so bad that Cassius can't help but use the white voice even outside of work, showing how his personality and culture are getting stripped away one workday at a time. When we see Mr. he is always using his white voice except for the one time when he is being real with Cassius, saying,
"Look here, young blood, we don't cry about the shit that should be. We just thrive in what is, and what is opportunity. This could be big, Cassius."
Which basically means he thinks there's nothing to do against the cruel world that they're involved in, and you might as well take advantage of the position you are given. A weak, maybe even a moral mindset, but a fair one for the one of only people who can understand the position that Cassius is in. It even affects Detroit, who can't help but use a white voice when she is talking to potential customers about her art, but when she goes to talk to Cassius, she talks normally. Contrary to Cassius, however, Detroit is working at her sign job, and she is wearing earrings that read, "Bury the rag deep in your face," a reference to The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, a song by Bob Dylan about Hattie Carroll, a worker who served drinks, and when she couldn't immediately assist a drunken Caucasian customer, he began to verbally and physically abuse her, resulting in her death several hours later. A comparison to how the white elite are still abusing the much poorer and more vulnerable African Americans to this day. Race is also seen throughout the signs on ads such as Worry Free, where it is always what seems to be a happy Caucasian family enjoying their time at Worry Free, except for the one ad that is about being a responsible baby daddy, where the black male is portrayed as irresponsible with cigarettes and alcohol, using a push method to motivate you to join Worry Free rather than a pull method. This ad also lets you know you can sign your whole family up to Worry Free, which is disturbing and shows how they prey on young people, minorities, and any otherwise vulnerable people. At the party is probably where the racism comes out the most, though. I mean, Steve is literally holding a whip like a slave owner half of the time. After asking if Cassius ever busted a cap in anyone's ass, the elites force Cassius to rap because he is black and rapping is associated with African American culture. Cassius, being unable to rap well, eventually resorts to doing what he knew the elites wanted him to do in the first place, acting like a stereotypical African American you would see on a gangster rap show. He said,
"Nigga shit, nigga shit, nigga, nigga, nigga shit, nigga shit, nigga shit, nigga, nigga, nigga shit. Nigga shit, nigga shit, nigga, nigga, nigga shit, nigga shit, nigga shit."
Until the elites join in, saying the N-word alongside him with no regard or respect to the meaning behind the word. At this point, Cassius is truly just a clown for their entertainment. After he realizes this and goes on to have the Equisapien interaction with Steve, he drops the white voice entirely and goes on to start a protest with members of the strike, football players, and some Equisapiens. This protest unfortunately has many similarities with the events that took place on August 11th, 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia. Some examples of these similarities include the police brutality, violence all around, and a car running into a crowd of protesters, all of which likely are not coincidences, and shows how Riley feels about the events in Charlottesville. It is strong imagery that brings out emotion in the viewer and relates the messages that are found throughout this film to real life and how they are still happening today. The main way we get to see Cassius' corruption throughout the film is through the color palettes chosen for each shot. According to an Ask Me Anything that Boots Riley did, he wanted it to feel like a messy warm hug in the beginning, and as he climbed up the ladder, things got cleaner and colder. When the shots are shown with more messy but inviting colors, it shows when Cassius' headspace is healthy and he has everything that he needs. But as he succeeds more financially, the colors get more stark and dry. For example, let's look at the first shot of Cassius on the bed with Detroit versus the last shot of him in the apartment alone after the party. In the first shot, everything is warm orange that fills up the whole screen with a comforting vibe, matching the hug that he is getting from his girlfriend. However, in the second shot, when Cassius is back from Steve's party and is alone at his lowest point, it is an all-white apartment with nothing but Cassius himself and a few decorations and furnishings to comfort him. The id, ego, and superego pop up again as well as we get to the scene where he decides to either leave his girlfriend and keep his job as a scab power caller or stay and protest with her. Because this is such a big decision, his id pops up on the TV as a screen of the episode, I Got the Shit Kicked Out of Me, showing his inner thoughts that are natural to every human. His ego as a news talking about the strike, which he's deciding to go for or against it right at the moment when he's watching the news, and his superego as a worry-free ad, which shows how he knows an immoral company he helps support is taking advantage of innocent people. As mentioned before, the headband from the soda injury is another symbol of his mental state throughout the film. When he decides to become a scab worker power caller, he gets the injury and coincides it with when he's the most lost morally. But once he decides to apologize to Squeeze and Salvador, his headband is gone and his injury is healed. Corruption shows up not just in Cassius, though, as we get a quick glimpse of a newspaper article saying Senate committee clears worry-free of slavery charges, and later on, not only both a Democrat from Ohio and a Republican from Alabama celebrate worry-free's financial growth, but a black man and a female do as well. Also, do you remember that Baby Daddy worry-free advertisement that was vandalized by Left Eye? Well, it appears that Steve I was so flattered and amused by it that he decided to keep it as one of his trophies, just like the sawed-off head of the rhino. As for the result of Cassius getting corrupted and turning into a bad person for a while, it seems there was a bit of twist to that, as karma may have forgiven him, but did not forget him for what he did. See, just when things are looking like they're going to wrap up in a happy ending the way it started in his uncle's garage, we notice that Detroit is wearing earrings that say Bella Ciao, and as you should know by now, all of her earrings have meaning. This time, Bella Ciao is a double entendre, as it translates literally into goodbye beautiful, as Cassius begins to lose his looks and transform into Equisapien, as well as being a folk song about a man leaving to fight Nazis in Germany and dying, which is a metaphor to Cassius losing his body in the fight against the extremely corrupt capitalists. Sorry to Bother You had a lot to tackle, with all 4 of the aforementioned chapters being prominent themes throughout the film. But by weaving them together, it not only allowed the movie to flow together better, but it made it more realistic. This is because, as with real life, all of these things affect each other and play upon each other to affect us. This movie is more than just about capitalism, or just about corruption, or whatever. It is about the reality of how all 4 of these major themes come together to shape the life that we live, and whether you like it or not, Boots Riley used a dystopian sci-fi type world to push his thoughts upon some of the biggest issues that face Americans today. But for the sake of time, that's all we can get into for this video. And regardless of if you enjoyed Riley's thoughts about America, if you enjoyed my analysis of it, please leave a like and subscribe. And as always, if you leave a comment, I will try to reply to it. And if you start a civil discussion in the comments, I will heart it so as to keep the discussion going and to hear other opinions. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.